that for the most part in our reactive state we do not see. There's also many kingdoms that encompass the one that we are perceiving here, that again in our reactive state we remain incapable of seeing. There are laws for each kingdom. There are laws specific to that kingdom, which gets us into the whole concept of temperance, which we'll get to, I'm sure, eventually. But yeah,
oh, that's too much. Oh,
basically, you know, as long as you can see this clearly, you know, we can have the lights up a little more. But you know, basically, once the image starts to get a little, you know, loses some sharpness, that's going to be a bit much. How is it looking for most of you people out there? Is there enough light to write, or do you need some more? A little more light? A little more light? Okay, you got enough to write with? Okay, how's the image look?
well, it weakens the picture, that's true.
Okay,
That's too much.
so far we've been talking about the pupillary frill.
You want that much light, the video won't come out so good, you know.
Down, Harry.
A little bit down, yes.
Tell me when.
That's it, yeah, that's better.
Okay, so far we've been talking about the pupillary frill. What are the two, in a structural and functional sense, what does the pupillary frill represent in the body? Okay, the stomach, what particularly about the stomach? The lining of the stomach, and then what else? The central nervous system. The stomach, the remainder of the stomach will really be represented out in zone 1. So it's not just the stomach, it's specifically the stomach lining and the central nervous system. In a practical sense, if you start to see problems in the pupillary frill, what do you do about it? I mean, you're doing an eye reading on somebody, and you know, you come in, they've got a nice dark pupillary frill. Well, that's all very well and good, but what are you going to suggest they do about it? Okay, sensitively T will be for what?
Nervous system.
Okay, the sensitively T will be for the central nervous system, and what about for the stomach lining? What's Okay, one of the simplest things you can do is to simply suggest that they stay away from the hot and cold drinks. That'll be of great benefit to the stomach lining. Nothing wrong with a warm drink or a cool drink. I mean, the easiest, you know, if you really want to keep it simple, if you can't stick your finger in the drink, if it's too hot to stick your finger in, it's too hot to pour down your throat. I mean, that's kind of the bottom line there. It's common sense, but it's one that most people violate on a pretty regular basis. I think if we knocked the handles off our teacups, we'd be better off too, because that way if you couldn't pick up the cup, you wouldn't drink it. Yeah, and there's a lot of good common sense in that. Okay, at any rate, we have a certain color range that's possible in the pupillary frill. Does anybody remember what it is? Okay, so the ideal color is going to be this sort of the orange. It's a really actually quite a bright orange. And then as that starts to go downhill, what's it going to turn to from the kind of an orangey brown to like a reddish brown to like a brown to a dark brown to a black. I mean, there'll be a number of... What's that? Thank you. At any rate, we'll have a color scale there from basically a bright orange to an orange brown to like a reddish kind of brown to a, say a light to medium brown, dark brown, black. You'll have a, kind of a range there. What is one thing that's going to be indicated when you start to see a very dark black pupillary frill? I mean, beyond the central nervous system and the stomach lining, what's one thing that John mentioned about that?
Resistance.
Okay, in terms of resistance to what specifically? Okay, resistance to receiving and resistance to being the effect. Resistance to receiving and resistance to being the effect. So now let's put yourself in the position of an iridologist who's out there doing iridology readings. How is this going to affect the way that you approach a person when you're doing an iridology reading? Well, you see a nice black pupillary frill, you realize that you have a person that's going to have a hard time what? Accepting new concepts, opening their mind to new things. They may be very slow to change. This is a person that's going to really have a serious, shall we say, a lot of expectations and conditions on the world. They want it, they want it their way. It's my way or the highway, right? So you may find that you have your hands full here, and it may be advisable to proceed slowly with this person. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
In what way? From a dog?
Well, here's the thing as I see it. When you're doing eye readings on people, first of all, you have to decide how much you're going to recommend. I mean, if you want to, if you just say like, well, I'm going to recommend everything the person could possibly benefit from, first of all, that's probably going to be far more than most people are going to want to spend anyways. So usually I have to temper it a little bit just from, pure financial parameters. But even beyond that, some people are going to be willing to just dive in head first and really go on a thorough program, and they're going to be happy to just immerse themselves in a healing crisis after healing crisis after healing crisis. And there will be others that will want to proceed more slowly. There will be other people who are just really not physically, mentally, or otherwise in shall we say, good candidates for the kamikaze approach of just immediately going on a full program and a diet that's mostly fresh and raw and all the rest. There's a lot of people that do not really mentally or physically have the, shall we say, the capacity to bend enough, and they're most likely going to break under those circumstances. So there's, put it this way, you don't necessarily put a person on a really heavy program just because they need it. You also have to look at what they can handle, what's going to work for them. Is this making sense to people?
Yeah.
And like when I do eye readings, I very frequently put a more sick person on a lighter program, just because from what I can see in the eye and from what I can pick up in talking with that person, I realize that if I put that particular person on too much, they're not going to stick with it anyways. It's just going to blow them out of the water, and they're going to probably head off in another direction within a couple of days or so. So, again, the level of severity of the physical condition is not the only factor you're going to look at as far as figuring out, like, do they need a big program or a little program or a middle-sized program. Is that making sense to everyone?
Yeah.
Okay, at any rate, let's go to the next slide here. Oh, the other next slide. Okay, so here we have what color with the pupillary frill? Okay, we have a fairly, this kind of grayish stuff out here is not really the pupillary frill. That's kind of like something that's penetrating out into zone 1. The pupillary frill is really quite narrow, and it's really a black color, or at least a very, very dark brown color here. So this is going to indicate the what? Okay, the resistance, the inability to receive, the resistance to being the effect. Central nervous system, stomach lining there. Let's look to the next slide here. Okay, what color would you say this pupillary frill is here? It's a pretty good dark one here. The lighting is kind of a little funny on this slide. I think there's like a red filter on the camera or something. So you've actually got a little bit of a tinge there, but that is kind of a dark filter. I might add from experience here that you will see, well, let me say this. First of all, I hope you will all take the time here this week as we're going over these things here. We're going over the pupillary frill. We're going to pretty much work through the eye sequentially from the inside out, going through different types of landmarks and things in the iris. I hope you will all take the time during the breaks to look at each other's eyes. Perhaps when we finish up tonight, you'll take the time to look at the pupillary frills of 4 or 5 other people and get a sense of what they look like. Because, first of all, we're learning it up here on the screen, and that's all very well and good, but it's a whole different ballgame when you start actually getting right down in there, trying to figure out which end of the loop to look in and getting right there up close and personal in somebody's face. So I hope you're going to... You look at this pupillary frill here. It's a little bit hard to distinguish it from the pupil, but one thing you'll notice about it is what?
Really thick.
It's very, very thick. When you start to see the color of the pupillary frill can vary not just according to color, but also according to thickness. There's actually a condition of the pupillary frill where it will be an orange in color, but it will actually be like extremely thin. It'll be thinner than normal, and a bright orange color. And this will actually indicate an individual who is hypersensitive. Hypersensitive. You will occasionally see a pupillary frill that is a nice bright orange color, but it is extremely thin. You're gonna have to get a little experience under your belt here, in order to figure out what's thick and what's thin. In other words, you're gonna have to get in there and look at a lot of pupillary frills. But you will occasionally see a pupillary frill that is orange and quite a bit thinner than usual. And this will indicate an individual who is very hypersensitive, overly sensitive.
What about thick?
As it starts, yes, what's that?
What about a thick frill?
Think about it this way. We've got different levels. Well, that's true. That's exactly what it is. You'd have an individual that's kind of starting to numb, starting to desensitize. The body. Do you remember John showed that chart earlier today where he was talking about the different levels, different fiber levels? And there was like subacute, acute, chronic, degenerative, and so forth. The thing to realize is as we pass from a condition of health down towards like a chronic state, we actually have to pass through an acute state first. When you're in a chronic or degenerative state, is that hyperactive or hypoactive? It's hypoactive, it's underactive. You all follow that? I mean, when you're chronic or degenerative in a given tissue, the metabolism is hypoactive, it's underactive. Before you get to an underactive state, though, you go through the overactive or hyperactive state. So there's kind of a progression there. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So you will find some people that may at one point in their life be very overly sensitive. Those people, because they're continually, shall we say, because their buttons are continually tweaked by their environment, they may eventually end up on the other end of things. They may eventually end up kind of numb and desensitized. Is that making sense? So I guess none of you were too numb to get that one, huh? All right. At any rate, does any question?
What do you give to the people who are hypersensitive?
Lots of love and patience. What do you give to the people who are very hypersensitive? I'm not, strictly speaking, really aware of any nutritional supplement that would specifically be for that person. Generally speaking, if you see that, or often when you see that, you'll see a lot of nerve rings accompanying it, which we'll get to. We'll get to the nerve rings. One nutrient that will have some benefit for a person with a lot of nerve rings will be some extra calcium. That may be of some benefit. But generally speaking, the most helpful thing that person can do is learn to work on their attitude, learn to work on their ability to lovingly and willingly experience the experiences of life. So I guess one of the best things you can do for a person like that, besides just love them as they are and be patient with them, is to give them a little advice. As far as just counsel them in the fine art of non-resistance. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, question back there.
You've got a mark here,
That's what we're getting to. Thank you, sir. I was about to ask if you noticed anything else unusual, and here we have a real bulge or outpouching in the pupillary frill there.
Is it a stomach ulcer?
Yeah, exactly. That will be a stomach ulcer. Y'all see this right there? It'd be pretty hard to miss there. You may well find this in some people here. Got enough people here. I'm sure we got a couple here. At any rate, you will find these black bulges or outpouchings into the pupillary, on the pupillary frill, which will indicate a stomach ulcer. Question, Paul.
Doug, I've seen quite a few of those ulcers, but what I'm interested in is you get the pupillary frill, and it's not a big bump like an ulcer, but they're little bumps, and sometimes there's 4 or 5 little tiny bumps. They're not as big as that, but they're...
Are they moving out, sort of out towards zone 1?
Yeah, that's correct.
It may well be the beginning of an ulcerative condition.
Sometimes I've seen up to 6 of these in the pupillary frill.
If it is actually a bulge or an outpouching into moving out into towards zone 1, it would be an ulcer. But there are also some other irregularities in the pupillary frill. It's a little hard to answer the question without actually seeing what you're talking about. If you find one here, show it to me, and I'll probably have a better idea of what it is, if it isn't an ulcer. Question there.
Is that bulge anywhere around that in the soles of the stomach?
It will be the stomach wherever it is. To some extent, you will have to some extent, bear in mind, again, a three-dimensional body mapped onto a two-dimensional surface. So you're never going to be able to absolutely precisely locate where it is, but to some extent, you will be able to figure out where it is in the eye based on what you might be able to figure out where it is in the stomach to some extent based on what you see in the eye. If you look at your eye chart here, you'll see in the left eye over medially, you'll see where it says cardia.
Yes.
In zone 1 there. And then you'll see over in the right eye where it will say the pylorus medially. The stomach is divided into three separate portions. The uppermost portion of the stomach is going to be your cardiac portion. The middle portion of the stomach is called your fundic portion, Fundic, and then the lowermost portion of the stomach, where it will be connected to the small intestine, is known as the pyloric region. So to some extent, by looking at where the blip is in the pupillary frill, you can kind of figure out where the ulcer is, whether it's on the left or the right or the top or the bottom. But frankly, when it comes down to it, how much difference does that make? I mean, it makes some difference because you can look and see what it reflexes to and all the rest. But I mean, as far as like what you're going to do about it, does it really make that much difference whether you have an ulcer on the left side of your stomach or the right side or the top or the bottom? I mean, in either case, you got an ulcer and you've got some things to work on there. Jody?
What about in the spine? Is that like where that sort of indicates down there?
I'm missing the boat here. What?
So it's pupil, like as far as the lumbar and that sort of area goes. Do you use that at all?
You mean the shape of the pupil? Yeah, we haven't really gotten into that yet, but you will see, you do want to look at the pupil itself, and one of the things that you'll see in some pupils is you'll see some irregularities in shape. You'll see a lot of pupils that are not really perfectly round. There'll be areas of them where they're kind of flat,
Up along.
What's that lump though?
Well, if you saw it towards a particular region of the body, you would say that that kind of pie slice of the eye that would be reflexed out from that flattened side of the pupil, that would be an area where there was an impingement of nerve supply to that area of the body. In many cases, if the appropriate region of the spine is adjusted, you'll actually see the pupil go back to your round shape. Of course, only until the spine goes out again, which might be 5 minutes or 5 days or 5 weeks or whatever. But you follow that? Okay. At any rate, we've got the black outpulsing here for an ulcer. Paul.
So I just wanted to talk about that ulcer a little bit more.
Alrighty.
Yeah,
That won't stress me out too much, but go ahead.
Okay.
All right.
Someone asked,
Just an ulcer joke. Go ahead.
someone asked, whether you
Come on up and get on tape here, Paul.
Well, quicker still, Doug, can you just repeat the question into that mic?
I can repeat it if I can hear it. Yeah, you can shout out the question and I'll try to repeat it in.
Okay, someone's already asked about the ulcer being anywhere in that stomach area, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Now, I haven't necessarily seen that the ulcer and reflex areas all the time. Now, is it do you get good reflex areas? Like when you see the little bump, you always...
I mean, like, in other words, if I see a bump here, do I often see things out here?
Yeah.
Very frequently, yes.
Okay.
Very frequently, yes. Do you all know what we mean by a reflex?
Yeah.
Okay, in the iris in particular, and this is something we'll go into in greater detail later in the week, but you're going to want to look at reflexes, and a 0-degree reflex is basically anything that's along the same line from the center outwards. Anything along this line is going to be a 0-degree reflex. So this whole area here is 0 degrees to the ulcer. You're also going to look at other reflexes eventually. You'd look at a 180-degree reflex, which would be straight across from the ulcer, and they're straight across from whatever you're looking at. And you can actually look at reflexes at all the multiples of 30 degrees. You can have 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, and 180-degree reflexes. Paul?
Another question on that. Now, I know that we can... The nutritional factors, okay? And then I wanted to ask about point holding, is there any point holding that we can do on that? Apart from that?
You can hold points on reflex points to the stomach. That would be a good start. You've got that one on the foot there between the pancreas and the thyroid there. In along the kind of by the ball of the foot there. And there's many other stomach reflex points you can work on. One thing that bears mentioning here. You all see the eye chart and how different chunks of the body are located in different portions of the iris. The thing to realize is that everybody is put together slightly differently. So you want to realize also that the eye chart should not be taken too literally. It's just a guide to kind of get you into the right ballpark. If a bunch of different people are cut open for surgery, what you're going to find is that none of them will have their internal organs in exactly the same place. I mean, generally speaking, this is over here and that's over there and so forth, but everybody's going to have their own unique kind of spatial relationship between the different organs and glands in the body. For the most part, we're all built the same, but there is variation. And the way this works with the iris is you actually have up to a 30-degree variation possible. Do you all know how much 30 degrees is? It's an hour. So something that shows up at, say, 5 o'clock in the iris can actually, in the iris chart, could actually be in your eye, could actually be anywhere from 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock. It's going to tend to be, it's like a bell curve, it's going to tend to be right around 5 o'clock if it says 5 o'clock in the chart. But it would not be at all unusual for it to be at 5:15 or 5:30 or 4:45 or 4:30.
That limits accuracy.
It's extremely. Iridology is not an exact science. I think the thing to realize is that nothing really is. I mean, we tend to think that medical diagnosis is infallible, but in reality, modern medical I think many people, until they've had some unfortunate experiences of their own with this, I think many people tend to assume that with all the high-tech stuff they've got today, that medical diagnosis is very, very accurate, and it simply isn't. I know there was a study done a few years back at the Mayo Clinic over in the States, which was, considered to be one of the finest medical institutions anywhere in the world, and they did a post-mortem study on people, and they found that actually roughly 50% of the time the people had died of something other than what they were being treated for. I mean, in other words, roughly half the time they'd been diagnosed incorrectly, and they were busy dying of something while they were being treated for something completely different. So you got to figure if the Mayo Clinic's only getting it right half the time, how's your, it's probably worse than that most places. So when we start to question, well, gee, how can we believe iridology? It's not 100% accurate. Just bear in mind what you're comparing it to. I mean, iridology is a very, very good tool to use, but no, of course it's not 100% accurate. I mean, for one thing, even without this degree of variation, you got the three-dimensional and two-dimensional eye, so you've already got many layers of uncertainty there right from the beginning. But is it a good tool? Yes, it's a very, very good tool, particularly the more experience you get with it. I might add, by the way, iridology does have a few advantages over most other systems of diagnosis. One of these is it's completely safe. I mean, there's no harm to the patient. All the medical forms of diagnosis, or virtually all of them, have adverse effects. I mean, whether you're talking X-rays, MRIs, CAT scans, or biopsies, or what have you, there are adverse effects on the body. Iridology, unless you slip and poke in the eye with your pen light, there's not too many health hazards to iridology. Compared to all these other techniques, it's also extremely inexpensive. An iris analysis is not a terribly expensive thing to get. So it does have a lot of advantages. It's also non-invasive. So it's got some nice advantages there as well. Who had a question over there?
I do.
Yes.
So if something's reflex, you would simply ask them about their symptomology to get the correct diagnosis?
It can be a little bit tricky sometimes to figure out just what's going on, but the thing is, a lot of times you will detect a problem somewhere in the eye, and you'll be trying to figure out just where that is, and you'll ask them a bunch of questions, okay, I'll give you an example. Look at the eye chart in the left eye, and look at the area around 7 o'clock. Yeah, look right around 7 o'clock in the left eye. let's assume we're working with a male here. And let's say we see something right in there in, say, zone 3 and 4, right around 7 o'clock in the left eye. You've got an awful lot of stuff that could be there. It could be the prostate, it could be the bladder, it could be something with the rectum there, it could be, and it could even be the adrenals or the kidneys, it could even be something up in the lower portion of the spine. So you've got a lot of stuff there within, between 6 and 8, let's put it that way. And the thing about it is by asking symptoms, even that's not going to necessarily narrow it down for you. I mean, let's say you got a man who's got something around 7 o'clock there and he has to get up to pee 3 or 4 times a night. Well, maybe it's prostate, maybe it's bladder. Maybe it's something going on with the lumbar spine that's messing up the prostate and the bladder. Maybe it's something, you see what I mean? Maybe it's something with that portion of the colon that's reflexing out. Maybe it's something with the rectum that's having, that's putting pressure onto that area.
That's what rectum was.
Right, that's what rectum. So the thing is that you've got a lot of possibilities there. You do have a lot of possibilities, and one of the best things that you can do with an iridologist is assume a position of uncertainty. I mean, don't think that you absolutely know what it is. Try to narrow it down and try to do the best you can, but then also be willing to be wrong. Let's put it that way. Here's the thing: sometimes you're going to find something in the eye, and you're not going to be able to. You'll ask 1,000,001 questions about all the stuff that's anywhere near that in the eye chart, and you still won't find anything that corresponds to it. So what's the next thing you can do? Well, you can start looking at reflexes. I mean, maybe they don't have any symptoms whatsoever for that particular thing you see in the iris, but maybe they got some symptoms 180 degrees away from that, or 90 degrees away from that, or 120 degrees away from that. You follow? So sometimes you can get it you can get it that way as well, and that's one area where the reflexes will come in. It will be very handy for you. Yes.
They're basically in a state of unconsciousness. They wouldn't have anything.
Okay, that brings me to my next point. Thank you. There will be many, many times where you will see something in the iris, and you will actually eventually be proven to be correct in what you see there. And yet at the time you'll ask the person, well, have you ever had any problems in such and such a place? And the person will be, no, never had any problems there. Well, they get on the program, a week passes, a month passes, a year passes. The body comes upscale. They're no longer unconscious. They're starting to get sensitivity in the body. They're starting to get memory in the body. Guess what happens? All of a sudden they remember. They start to feel again. I'll just give you an illustration of how numb people are and how much. Here's a good one. How many of you have ever broken, say, an arm? Okay. How many of you have broken an arm, say more than 20 or 30 years ago? Okay. How many of you know which arm it was? Or let me put it this way: how many of you aren't quite sure? Any of you? Okay, none here, but I'll tell you this. Okay, we've got a couple. I have found repeatedly in doing eye readings, when I ask people the question about, have you ever broken any bones? I've found it's incredible how many people have broken like arms and legs and what have you. And when you ask them, well, which side was it, left or right, they really have to think about it. And in some cases, they flat out can't tell you. They're maybe 40 or 50 now, and they broke a leg when they were 10 or whatever, and they absolutely can't remember which leg it was. So what does that tell you about the degree of sensitivity in the body? Not much. I mean, they absolutely cannot remember what leg they broke. Now, what I've seen a lot of over the years in doing eye readings is I've seen people come back, sometimes only a week or two later, sometimes a year or two later, and they'll go, you asked me about such and such. You asked me if I ever had any problems in my right shoulder or my left elbow or my right knee or right ankle or what have you. And I didn't remember. And then, I got on the program, and 6 months later, all of a sudden, I went through this healing crisis, and I remember this time as a kid when I fell and, twisted it or sprained it or what have you. So the thing is, a lot of times, this will be another complicating factor here, Lucia. You'll be seeing something there that they'll just be completely unconscious to. Does that make sense to everyone? Yeah. So a lot of times, don't get discouraged as an iridologist if you keep asking people questions and you keep getting a bunch of no answers. You know, I can remember when I was first doing eye reading, sometimes it would be I'd start to really think, gosh, I must not know what the heck I'm doing, because I keep asking people, they got problems here, and problems there, and problems everywhere. And you know, sometimes you get a person that'll answer no about 15, 20 times in a row. Well, oftentimes you may be right on, but you just have a person that's extremely numb, and they just haven't gotten up to the level of feeling yet. Of course, sometimes you get the opposite extreme. You get the hypochondriac that answers yes to every question you ask. That's not much help either in trying to figure out what's going on there. Other questions there?
Yes, please, sir.
Yes, sir.
Does it follow if you've got a thick black pupillary frill, and you're saying this, you're viewing unconsciousness, if you're looking in eyes where there's a very fine orange one, where you said people are super sensitive, does it necessarily follow that when they get on a program, they're going to reach healing crisis quicker? I mean, is the irritation in the eye the measure of their advancement, if you like? If that's
The question as I'm hearing it is the color of the pupillary frill going to be an indication of how rapidly they'll go into healing crisis?
And the thickness of it also.
And the thickness.
Yeah.
To some extent, yes. To some extent, yes. But there are many, many other factors as well. Did everybody follow that?
Yeah.
There are many, many other factors. The degree of the program they do, how strong their constitution is, and many, many other factors. The dedication and intent of the individual. There's a lot of factors that will come into play there. But I'd say by and large, a person with a real dark, thick pupillary frill, it may take a little bit more effort to get them off center. It may take a little bit more for them to really get out of balance. Okay, question? Frank?
Just like looking at that eye now, I just say, for instance, that big blob that's sticking out, like the ulcer.
That's a technical term.
Yeah.
B-L-O-B. Frank's already done some advanced work. So.
I know a lot about blobs. What I'm going to get straight, right, is that you can ask a person, look, are you hurting in the stomach? They might say no.
That'll happen quite often.
Because of their numbness, but is it because also that condition might be coming up in the future, say about 10 years' time or 5 years' time? It's an indication.
There's already an ulcer. No, I know what you're saying, Frank. No, there is already an ulcer there, or has been in the past.
Right.
But there are many situations, again, there's an incredible amount of numbness in the human body. And so a lot of times people have relatively serious problems without without really knowing it. Bear this in mind with respect to ulcers. And you guys probably have different brand names down here, but think of how many Tums and Rolaids and that kind of stuff, all the antacids and all the rest people take down. Is that what you have down here?
Yeah.
Well, whatever. I mean, people take stuff, people do a lot of that. There's an awful lot of people that have severe stomach problems, but they see so many other people, taking down the antacids that I think they accept that as normal.
Yes, they do.
It's like, everybody's tired and run down, so that must be normal. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think there's an awful lot of people out there that have ulcers that just frankly don't realize it.
Antacids are the second largest over-the-counter drug sold in Australia.
Did y'all hear that? Antacids are the second largest over-the-counter drug in Australia. Yeah.
What they do in the long run is they lower your hydrochloric acid in your stomach, so you get worse anyway.
Oh yeah, they're no help. They're definitely no. I'm not pushing antacids here. I'm just saying that it's an indication of the commonness or the frequency of stomach problems. So I mean, I'm just saying I've seen plenty of people with blips like blobs like this who were unaware of having ulcers, and yet you see that and there is an ulcer there. Oh, what's that? Well, I'd say it looks to me like a lot of times you kind of temper it a little bit. So sometimes what I would say is, I'd say, have you ever had an ulcer? And if they kind of said no or whatever, I'd say, have you ever had a lot of stomach problems, just hurt after you eat and all that? I'd say, look here, it kind of looks to me like you're kind of, a lot of times if I see something that's already there, I'll kind of sort of phrase it like, this is what it looks like it's gonna happen if you don't start, straightening up and flying right here. Do you know what I mean? So sometimes you kind of handle it that way because you don't want to scare a person. Does that make sense?
Now that we know
Yeah.
that stomach ulcer has been caused by a virus, then where do we go?
What's that?
I say the latest studies show from an Australian doctor who has now proven it worldwide that stomach ulcers are caused by a virus or a bacterial.
I think what they're talking is I believe it's actually bacteria, the Helicobacter pylori.
Oh, that's it. Yeah.
Okay. Mel's question is, what do we do now that we know this stomach virus or stomach ulcer is caused by a bacteria? Well, first of all, why is there a bacteria in there?
No hydrochloric
Degeneration.
In light of what we talked about this morning, the only reason that you're going to have those bacteria there in the first place is because you have the host condition.
That's right.
So in reality, do the bacteria cause the ulcer?
No.
No. The bacteria are there because there's the right host condition in order for the bacteria that's there. They may well do some of the damage once they're proliferating. I mean, I do not doubt that whatever person you're referring to, because I've seen some articles on that as well, I do not doubt that in many, many, many instances of ulcers you will find this particular bacteria there, but I would certainly not say that the bacteria is the cause of it. I would say it's maybe it's an effect of the host condition, and in that sense it may well be a secondary cause, an associated complication, let's put it that way.
It's like the fruit fly.
It's like the fruit fly. We need to, in the ultimate sense, we need to raise the general overall level of health in the body with minerals and enzymes and all the rest. There's some specific things you can do for the digestive system. One thing that will be tremendous for ulcers is the pawpaw, the green pawpaw.
Yeah.
That will be wonderful. Bear in mind the law of healing crisis. How is the body going to heal?
Inside out.
It's going to heal from the inside out. So when you see this in somebody, you know that this is probably something that's going to happen fairly quickly. So the thing is, if a person with this type of a blob here gets on a pretty heavy program, you can probably expect that they're going to get some pretty severe stomach symptoms as they start to heal. Does that make sense to everybody? So sometimes the value in iridology is not just in figuring out what's happened in the past, but it's also in predicting what's going to happen in the future as you heal. Y'all see what I mean?
Yes.
When you really understand iridology, you realize that it's a very wonderful tool to help you predict what healing crises are going to come your way or are going to come the way of whoever's getting on the program. I'll tell you a little story about stomach problems here. I taught an iridology course up in Minnesota one time, and this one gentleman up there got very, very intrigued with iridology, and he really took it to heart. He really spent a lot of time looking at eyes, and practically anybody that walked in the house, he was looking in their eyes, and he actually became quite a very keen observer of the iris in a pretty short time. And he had a certain individual come to him who had been sent home to die by the doctors because he had what they termed inoperable stomach cancer. He had a severe stomach cancer, and he was given no hope of recovery. He was told that it was inoperable and there was nothing they could do for him. This individual, at the urging of his family, came to this man that I taught and wanted to get on a real thorough program. So this guy put him on a program. He called me up on the phone, and I fine-tuned it a tad, but not really much. He had him on a good one. And this guy basically started to do the program. He started to eat a lot of the fresh and raw food, the fresh juices, high levels of minerals, enzymes, and all the rest. He had the complete and full support and cooperation of his family, of his wife and children. Absolute tremendous support team around him. He began to go into healing crisis quite abruptly, fairly quickly, and he was in a tremendous amount of pain. My friend that was monitoring his eyes, and as I said, this man was a very, very keen observer of the iris. He said that this guy was unquestionably getting better. Where he had all this black in the not just in the stomach lining, but bulging out into zone 1 into the stomach, where he had all this, horrible black and dark brown stuff. You were starting to see a lot of lightening up of color. You were starting to see tremendous improvement in the man's iris. How did the man feel? He absolutely felt like he was dying. Okay? Absolutely felt like he was dying. He was very concerned. His family was very concerned. My friend reassured them as best he could that the man was actually getting better. After this guy had been on the program a matter of, I think, about 2 to 3 weeks, and remember, he'd started off with, inoperable stomach cancer. After he'd been on the program only a matter of a couple weeks, he vomited up a huge, huge tumor from his stomach. It was said, I never saw this myself, but they said that the tumor was as large as his fist. Wow. They said it was like leather. They said it was so large that the people, like his family and so forth, they said that if they hadn't actually seen it come up, they would not have believed that it could possibly have made it up and out of his throat. Yeah, that was a block. That was a block. Now, here's the thing to consider. The body can go into healing crisis very quickly under the right circumstances. And the body will heal from the inside out. So the stomach and the digestive system, as many of you are discovering to your delight, will be some of the first areas that will respond to the minerals and the enzymes and all the rest, right? I mean, you get the diarrhea, you go back to the healing crisis on the constipation, you get the stomach pains, you get the nausea and all the rest, right? So these are some of the first areas that